Endurance racing has recently entered a golden age, with the IMSA, LMDH and the WEC Hypercar rules taking effect in 2021, which allowed crossover between the two series. So it means that if you run one car in the WEC, you can take it over to IMSA and vice versa. And it's kicked off this interest in endurance racing that hasn't been seen since the Group C era. I know that's a point I reiterate a lot, but it's true. And I did a video on the differences between the two last year, but I'll just go over it again very quickly. They're the same, but they're not. Now bear with me here. So if you build a car to LMH rules, the manufacturer builds the car, and they can choose whether or not to put in a hybrid. So Isotta Fraschini, Glickenhaus and Vanwall chose not to, while Aston Martin decided to forego the hybrid in favour of a V12. A V12! In this economy, with these regulations and these fuel prices located on the tracks of Europe and North America. Yes. Can I see it? Yes. For LMDH, it's slightly different. The manufacturers, in this case Cadillac, Acura, Porsche and BMW, have to have the car constructed by external chassis manufacturers. So that's either Multimatic, Orica, Dallara or Ligier. The MGU must come from Bosch, while the batteries are supplied by Williams, of all people. So there's two ways of doing it. LMH allows the manufacturer full control over what they do in terms of how they construct the car, so long as it meets the regulations, obviously, while LMDH allows the brands to have their badges out there, but it involves less cost and a little bit less risk in terms of the return on the investment. As it stands, cars built to LMDH standards are the Acura, BMW, Cadillac, Porsche, Alpine and Lambo, while the Genesis, Hyundai, will be coming next year. Ford and McLaren will also have LMDHs coming for 2027. In LMH, Glickenhaus, Peugeot, Ferrari, Vanwall, Isotta Fraschini and Aston Martin have been built to these regulations, with only Aston Martin doing IMSA as well as the WEC. Toyota doesn't go to IMSA because they already have American representation in NASCAR, and Alpine stays in the WEC despite being in LMDH because Alpine/Renault doesn't sell cars in North America. And this is true for Peugeot. Although Peugeot is a hypercar, not an LMDH, but the statement about the cars being sold in North America is still true. There's a rule that IMSA has. If your car is not sold in North America, then you can't race. And also in there is Toyota. And before Toyota became one of the inaugural hypercar manufacturers in 2021, they were involved in another category called LMP1. Before Toyota joined the Audi Show, LMP1, their last attempt at the World Endurance Championship was back in 1999 when they entered the GT1, a car that was built to GT1 rules but then got adapted into the LMGTP regulations. Now, I've also done a video on LMP1 as a whole and also the GT1 years, and, well, I'll just direct you to those two videos that I'll link in the description because endurance racing was in a bit of a pickle following the demise of Group C and the World Sports Car Championship in 1992. This was the period where the FIA was throwing categories at the walls in the hope that they'd stick in terms of getting manufacturers involved. These categories didn't seem to be around for very long, and when they did stick around, they ultimately got too expensive. Such is the case with most of these much-loved categories. At the 1998 24 Hours of Le Mans, the number 28 was involved in an accident that took it out of the race at around the halfway mark, while another GT1 suffered a gearbox failure in the closing stages. The remaining car finished 9th and was 25 laps behind the winning Porsche 911 GT1. Despite being in a slower class compared to the Le Mans prototypes that were also on the grid, the GT1 was able to outperform some of them, with one of the GT1s being second on the grid for the 1998 race. In 1999 the rules changed again. GT1 had proved so popular the FIA wanted to stick with it for a little bit longer. So the GT1, the Toyota GT1 that is, had to be adapted to new regulations so it could race in 1999. But like I said, I'll leave a link to the GT1 and LMP1 videos so you can try and keep track of how the categories changed in that period between 1992 and around 2011-2012 or so. But the GT1 still proved to be competitive, but it had its drawbacks. It was too thirsty, for one, and if a tyre blew, it tended to destroy the entire rear of the car. Azukio Katayama found out challenging for the lead in the 1999 24 Hours of Le Mans, and Martin Brundle also suffered the same fate. As did Thierry Boutsen, who had a massive shunt after a tyre blew, and that ended his racing career. The only one of the three Toyotas that finished was the Katayama car that survived where the others were unlucky, and he finished second and a lap down. So as it was, Toyota took a bit of a break from sports car racing. They continued in the WRC with the Corolla for a bit, and they also went into Formula 1 in 2002, where things went a bit, Well, I've done a video on that as well, as it so happens, so you've got a lot of extra things to watch after this, if you want. But in 2012, they came back to endurance racing with the TS030. By this point, LMP1 was as we know and love it, or knew and loved it. The cars were closed cockpit from 2011 onwards, and also had a Formula 1 style shark fin added for aerodynamic stability. As well as this, the LMP1s were now allowed to use hybrid technology that is now seen in Formula 1 to improve fuel efficiency and take advantage of emerging technologies. Toyota had actually begun work on the car in 2010, but they had to stop the development of the car briefly after the earthquake and tsunami that decimated part of the Japanese coast and also set off the nuclear meltdown at Fukushima. But it resumed 6 months later when the project was reapproved. Toyota managed to get the project restarted, and the first car hit the track at Paul Ricard so they could show it off to the world. The car was powered by a 3.4 litre naturally aspirated V8 that was hooked up to a supercapacitor rather than the batteries that you would usually see on a hybrid. IndyCar is now using supercapacitors on their hybrid system, and interest in the technology has increased as of late, because supercapacitors can charge up faster and deploy the energy a bit more efficiently than a battery can. The difference between the two? Well, batteries store the electrical energy chemically, while capacitors store it as a static charge. And Toyota's system was quite ingenious, in a way. Using a KERS system much like the one found in Formula 1 cars of the time, it charged the supercapacitor up under braking, and then under deployment, the power was sent to the rear wheels. While the Formula 1 system was around 80 horsepower in terms of a boost, the supercapacitor in the Toyota's passenger compartment would put out a whopping 300 horsepower. In turn, this would save fuel as the car accelerated out of a corner and gave the car a much better speed boost under acceleration. Audi, meanwhile, sent their power to the front wheels with a minimum deployment speed of about 75 miles an hour. Toyota, meanwhile, could deploy the power whenever they wanted. And there's actually been some debate as to whether or not these will be useful on road cars in the near future, because capacitors can leak energy. If you have a plug-in hybrid or an electric car and then charge it up and then go on holiday for 2 weeks, you'll come home and the range will be significantly lower than when you left. The car was supposed to debut at the 2012 6 Hours of Spa, but the chassis was written off in testing. At Le Mans they entered 2 cars, but the engine blew in the number 7, while Anthony Davidson was involved in a smash in the number 8. After that they ran just 1 car for the rest of the season, but despite Audi having a stranglehold on LMP1 at the time, the Toyota wasn't too far off. Toyota had assembled a lineup that was on paper much better than the driver lineups they'd assembled in Formula 1, so maybe they'd learned from their mistakes. While Sebastian Buemi and Kazuki Nakajima were open-wheel drivers with no experience of endurance racing, they'd called on Anthony Davidson, who did have some experience, and they also hired Alex Wurz, who had won Le Mans twice. They also had Nicolas Lapierre, who was an up-and-comer in endurance racing. Lapierre and Wurz were able to take second in the championship with 3 wins. Now it must be said here that Audi and Toyota were the only manufacturers in this particular category, with privateers entering non-hybrid LMP1s elsewhere, such as Rebellion. Now, let's be honest people, aside from those 3 years or so towards the end of the LMP1 regulations, it wasn't exactly teeming with competition. But we'll get there in a minute. Audi was dominant, but it wasn't a clean sweep. In 2013, Toyota once again entered only 1 car, but would use a second car for a couple of races. Improvements to the engine for reliability were made, and there was a change to the front end. The change to the front end done because there was now a ban on deploying hybrid to the front wheels. But really, 2013 was a stopgap year because in 2014, the regulations would be fine-tuned and it would render the car obsolete. Toyota also had limited resources at the time, so that's why only 1 car was run. And once again, they were able to stop Audi having a clean sweep of the wins, as they took 2 wins and also finished second at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. On top of this, Toyota scored a home victory at Fuji, although, to be honest, this race was basically endurance racing's version of the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix. And Toyota had kind of lucked into it because Audi, who had started on pole, pitted during a safety car period. But like mentioned, the car was going to be made obsolete, and in 2014 they would bring a new car, the 040. The car was different aerodynamically and the internals were changed, with the KERS system on the front and rear for maximum regeneration on braking, and the engine up to a 3.7 litre V8. The car was now capable of 4-wheel drive, with the hybrid now being deployed from the front rather than the rear, which I think was a regulation change at the time. It doesn't make sense to me because reading everything for this video, it looks like front deployment was banned for 2013 but then legal again for 2014. I don't get it, it's not been very well explained online. But if someone can confirm all of that, that would be great because the regulations just seem to be all over the shop. At the same time, the regulations required the car to be about 2 inches narrower and all cars had to be coupes. Cool. LMP1 cars were super cool and I just love the engineering behind them, and the Porsche 919 is one of my favourite racing cars of all time. But at the same time, maybe they were a bit too complicated. They were more complex than Formula 1 cars at the time, and they had over 1,000 horsepower until they were reined in around 2016 or so. Suspension changes were also made to the car, and as a result the car became much easier on its Michelin tyres. And Audi was finally given a wake-up call when Toyota turned up to the first 2 rounds of the season and won them. At Silverstone, tyre strategy allowed Buemi, who had taken intermediates and not full wets, to take the victory there as the track dried out. And at the 6 hours of Spa, Buemi's car again used tyre strategies to get to the front and stayed there while the Porsches encountered issues. Audi would still win Le Mans though. As it was, Toyota actually won the World Endurance Championship in 2014, despite everybody saying that this was the time that Audi and Porsche were winning everything in sight and dominating the hell out of the category. Toyota won at Silverstone, Spa, Fuji, Shanghai and Bahrain on their way to victory, finally giving some competition to the category that had, up until now, been the Audi Show. With Porsche making headway through 2014 in their exploration year, it looked like the LMP1 was about to kick off. But everybody was going to be let down in a big way, because 2015 was the Porsche Show. They obliterated that season, as Mark Webber, Timo Bernhard and Brendan Hartley won the driver's side of things. Audi was outscored by 80 points or so, and Toyota looked to have fallen off completely. Toyota was also not helped through losing Nakajima due to a heavy shunt at Spa, smashing into Oliver Jarvis's Audi in thick spray and breaking his back. Kamui Kobayashi had been signed up as a test driver following Caterham's demise in Formula 1, but was unavailable for that race. And then the number 1 Toyota had electrical problems and throttle problems over the course of the 6 hours. Nakajima would be back for Le Mans, but the car was well off the pace compared to Audi and Porsche. There seemed to be driver errors creeping in as well. Davidson had made contact with a Ferrari at Le Mans and ruined the handling, and then had another collision later on. At COTA, Davidson missed the pit lane entry and had to take a stop-go penalty, almost running out of fuel. Mike Conway crashed into some LMP2s that he was lapping and then crashed out completely later on. Sarrazin meanwhile hit a Porsche GTE at Fuji, resulting in the entire cooling system needing to be replaced. But it's okay, the 050 would be coming for 2016, which would bring with it Toyota's most infamous moment at Le Mans. Hello darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again. But Toyota had made a raft of changes. The supercapacitor and the V8 were gone and replaced by a smaller V6 and batteries, although the engine was a 2.4 litre and not a 1.6 litre V6 found in Formula 1 cars. The suspension was tweaked and the nose raised up like on the Porsche and Audi to better exploit the aero properties of these types of cars. The season also started strongly with a second place at Silverstone, but then hit trouble at Spa as the cornering forces at Eau Rouge were harming the engine. Somehow. But it's at Le Mans where they made headlines for all the wrong reasons. After starting 3rd and 4th behind the Porsches, they worked their way into the lead and looked set to beat the Porsches to the line and do so on merit, something that had been hoped for because of the dominance run the Porsches had been on at this point in time. But with about 6.5 minutes left on the clock, Nakajima's Toyota had a 1 minute 15 second lead over Yanni's Porsche, but he got on the radio saying that he had a loss of power on acceleration due to the connector line between the turbo and intercooler going on the fritz, allowing Yanni to close in by about 30 seconds as Nakajima slowed to about 120 miles an hour on the Mulsanne. 2 minutes later, the car slowed down again, losing Nakajima even more time. And as the cars came round to start the next lap, the Toyota was stuck at the side of the road by the start-finish line, allowing Yanni to take over the lead and hand Porsche the victory right at the death, in one of the most heartbreaking ends to a 24-hour race ever seen. Toyota could take consolation in the fact that they got second place with the Sarrazin, Conway and Kobayashi car, but it was 3 laps down, and they were just 3 minutes or so away from their first ever win at Le Mans, and they would win just one race all year, that being when Conway, Sarrazin and Kobayashi won at Fuji. In 2017 though, things went a little better. Le Mans was once again a nail-biter, with an LMP2 almost taking the overall win because it seemed that every single LMP1 on the grid had issues, but Porsche managed to take the win in the end. By this point, Audi had dropped out of the LMP1 category in the wake of the VW emissions scandal, leaving just Porsche and Toyota on the grid. As a result, Toyota was scoring a bit better and came out of the blocks quite quickly, winning at Silverstone and Spa, but only one of the 3 cars finished at Le Mans in 8th. They got a 4th at the Nürburgring, 3rds at Mexico and COTA, and then finished the season with 3 wins at Fuji, Shanghai and Bahrain. After which, Porsche pulled out after winning the category again, and Toyota remained the only manufacturer on the grid. And this was going to be an issue. Because they were the only manufacturer left, it was almost a case of just turn up, because all the other LMP1s on the grid were non-hybrid LMP1s, built by the likes of Ginetta, Rebellion and so on. Stuff that was never in a million years going to compete with the Toyotas. Really, their only hope was for Toyota to have issues in the races. Toyota had got a power advantage and a fuel efficiency advantage over the course of a lap. So something was brought in called equivalence of technology. It's a bit like BOP, but it was designed to level the playing field between the hybrids and the non-hybrids. It wasn't the first time that it was done though. EOT had initially come in to balance out the difference between the diesel Audis and the petrols that were used by everybody else, because the diesels had been so efficient on fuel. At the time EOT was brought in again for 2018, the Toyotas had a 1 second a lap advantage over the fastest non-hybrid, and they sought to bring that advantage down, with massive punishments in place for anybody caught sandbagging. Toyota agreed to a 26 kilo increase in the minimum weight, and there had been moments in testing where the non-hybrids could be faster. The issue was, EOT only applied to WEC rounds, not to Le Mans, which is run by the ACO. The non-hybrids were restricted to 10-lap stints, while the Toyotas, which also had shorter fill times, were allowed to go 11 laps. Toyota had managed to keep their 1-lap advantage over the non-hybrids, and because of other rules that had been put in place to do with EOT, it effectively meant that it was impossible, if not illegal, for the non-hybrids to be faster than the Toyotas. As a result, the 2018 24 Hours of Le Mans became known as the race that Toyota couldn't lose, or shouldn't be able to lose, or couldn't afford to lose, whichever article you read online. So, not surprisingly, they got a 1-2, with Alonso's car taking the win. Now you can debate all day and all night about how it was all rigged for Alonso because of the marketing, but the intra-team rivalry between the two Toyotas was the only interesting thing about that race. The rest of the season, it was a cakewalk. Toyota won every race with the exception of Silverstone, where they were disqualified for low ride heights, which gave Rebellion a win. At Spa, the Kobayashi car finished 4 laps down, assuming because of issues. And it was the same through the season ending 2020, a season all over the place because of the global situation, as we'll call it. The WEC was now in a spot of bother because they only had one manufacturer and nobody else was willing to join in because the costs had gone through the roof. The hypercar regulations were in the works, but were then changed to what we have now. During that season, Rebellion were able to take 2 wins at Shanghai and COTA, but the LMP1 category was now down to 3 manufacturers. Partly due to the pandemic, but mostly because there was no point in turning up because the costs were too high, and there was no real way of fighting because even with Success Ballast, Toyota had bigger pockets and better engineers. Success Ballast did help Rebellion out a tiny bit. They managed to score 2 wins, and the first of those wins was the first time that a non-hybrid had won on track for a very long time. But as it was, Toyota took the Constructors' Championship at Le Mans, but the Drivers' Championship still went down to the wire at the final race. But Toyota got that, and then LMP1 was done. Forever. Toyota, though, has carried on its domination of endurance racing with the new hypercar regulations, winning the first 4 years of competition despite losing out at Le Mans to Ferrari in the last couple of years. Despite the tag of only winning because there was no Germans, Toyota almost won Le Mans in 2016 on merit, if not for that breakdown with about a lap left to run. And they won the 2014 title against the all-concrete Audis. So they did have something going for them. But the issue is, most people will only see the 2017 to 2020 years of that LMP1 run and go, yeah, but the Germans weren't there. But I'd like to know what you think down in the comments. It does look like the overall domination is waning though. They're currently 3rd in the championship and they're winning fewer and fewer races despite winning the championships. So it looks like that the endurance stuff is all mixed up and that's what people want to see. And with so many manufacturers involved in endurance racing right now, Le Mans over the next few years is going to look incredible. So then, a look at Toyota's LMP1 project, and while it might look like they only won because of no competition, they did have some moments where they were legitimately competitive. So if this has been a fun look through the motorsport history books, then do like the video so I know a good job was done. And for more stuff from the channel, get subscribed and also get the bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the mad lads at Patreon that continue to support me at a more personal level. And if you want to join the people on screen, there is a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates, and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. Or there's super thanks for a one and done donation, and memberships for Patreon without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward. Have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.